In this class, we will focus on another application of short-term decisions that is represented by alternatives evaluation. We are talking about the evaluation of alternatives with respect to the operating activity of the company. So the typical example of the alternative evaluation is the make or buy decision. So it is more convenient to produce inside or to outsource the production. So in this case, our problem is alternative 1 versus alternative, let's say, 2. So which among several alternatives is the best one. Also in this case, in order to approach this kind of short-term decision, the net operating income approach is the one that is adopted. So let's see in detail how we can approach these alternatives evaluation. Given that we are talking about evaluating different alternatives, the approach is very similar to the investment appraisal, but in this case, rather than calculating the NPV, we are calculating the net operating income with respect to our alternatives. Let's see in detail the steps for evaluating alternatives. We can identify some steps. The first step that we have is the identification of the alternatives. It seems really simple, but what we need to do is to identify the alternatives, which are the options that we have. The second step is represented by the identification of a base case, so our reference case against which we are evaluating the convenience of our decision. While the third step is the calculation of the convenience of our decision, that is the calculation of the net operating income, where the net operating income is calculated as the difference between revenues minus relevant costs. So we are just considering those costs that are relevant for our decision. So all of the sunk costs should be not taken into account. Let's see with a small example how we can apply this alternative evaluation. Assuming that we want to focus on a make or buy decision, that is something really common when we have alternatives evaluation. Our problem is that we need to realize 50 units of our product, and the problem is it more convenient to make the unit inside or to buy them outside? So that's the main problem. Let's see what changes. Either we are using the make or the buy. We need, of course, some data. We have our make, and then we have our buy alternative. We need to detail them. If we are making the 50 units inside, we have, for example, direct material costs of 20 euros. Then we have direct labor cost, assuming of 25 euros. And then we can have overhead, that can be just the energy cost, in order to realize these 50 units of production of 5 euros. While in the moment in which we buy the product, so we purchase the product for someone else, we have the purchasing price from outside, and this purchasing price can be of 60 euros. We need to understand if it is more convenient to realize the units inside or to purchase them outside. Our base case can be the make, so we can consider the internal production as our reference case. So we have identified the alternative, we have the base case. Now we should compare them in order to identify which of the two is more convenient. If we are buying outside, do we have direct material? No. So if we are buying outside, we have a saving of 20 euros. So this is the delta of our decision. Then the second question is, if we are purchasing outside, do we have direct labor costs? And the answer is no. So we will save 25 euros. If we are purchasing outside, do we have the cost of the energy to realize these 50 units? And the answer is no. So we will save again 5 euros. If we are purchasing outside, however, we have additional 60 euros of cost, so we have plus 60. So if we consider the delta between the cost of purchasing outside with respect to the inside, we will have that we will have additional 60 euros of cost, but we will save 50 euros. So if we consider the difference between them, we will have that if we purchase outside, we will have additional 10 euros of cost. So we can also calculate the cost of each alternatives in total. So we will have 50 euros for producing inside and then 60 euros to purchase outside. And we can see that if we realize the production inside, we will spend 50 euros, while if we purchase the same production outside, we will have 60 euros. And by comparing them, we can see that it is more convenient to realize the production inside rather than purchasing the product outside, because we are saving 10 euros. Usually, when we evaluate alternatives, we do not consider the overall cost of the alternative 1 and then the overall cost of the alternative B, but we just think in terms of differential cost. So in this case, if we look at the differential cost, we are just spending, let's say, 10 euros more in the moment in which we purchase outside. If we want to apply our net operating income formula, we will have that revenue in this case is 0 because we are not selling anything, and the relevant cost are of 10 euros, so we are spending 10 euros more. So because of this additional 10 euros of cost, it is more convenient to produce inside. If we want to summarize everything and go back again to our reference schema for applications of short-term decision, we can say that in the moment in which we are evaluating alternative, the approach that we use is an approach that focuses on the distinction between relevant versus sunk costs, and the focus is on the relevant costs only, so that we can calculate the net operating income as the difference between the additional revenue of our alternative minus the relevant costs. And the alternative that is able to generate the highest net operating income is the selected alternative. If we look at the overall schema that we have, we can see that the formula that is used in order to approach the short-term decision is a net operating income formula that is calculated as the difference between revenue and costs. We can then look at this formula from a different perspective and then approach different types of problems. If we have the break-even point problem, we identify the quantity to break even. If we are talking about a production mix, the approach is to identify the contribution margin per scarce resource, while in the moment in which we are evaluating alternative, we can calculate the net operating income by considering only marginal revenues and then marginal costs. So by starting from the same formula, we can approach it in a different way depending on the specific problem.